It's no secret that Boeing has had major issues since the launch of the Boeing 737 MAX in 2016. Unfortunately for Boeing, these issues will only continue to get worse as the company is set to cut 17,000 jobs, delay the Boeing 777X debut, and end the production of the Boeing 767 freighters. Today, we'll explore all these subjects and continue adding to the everlasting issues for Boeing. Without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started, everybody. So yeah, if you all have been paying attention to what's going on with Boeing, you would note that it's not been very good over the last several years, but especially in the last couple since the pandemic, it just continues to pile on. And today I have an article from Yahoo Finance diving into all what we need to know here, and it's also sponsored by Rerouters as well, which is a very reputable aviation source. So we'll go dive into this and I'll add some analysis at the end for you all as well. Let's go ahead and get started, everybody, as Boeing to cut 17,000 jobs to delay the first 777X jet as strike hits finances. So here we go by Nelson Lemport and David Spepperman as well. Boeing will cut 17,000 jobs, 10% of its global workforce, delay the first deliveries of the 777X jet by a year, and record $5 billion in losses in the third quarter as the U.S. plane maker continues to spiral during a month-long strike. CEO Kelly Ofsberg said in a message to employees that the significant downsizing is necessary to align with our financial reality after an ongoing strike by 33,000 U.S. West Coast workers halted the production of its Boeing 737 MAX, 767, and 777 jets. Quote, "We reset our workforce levels to align with our financial reality and to gain a more focused set of priorities. Over the coming months, we are planning to reduce the size of our total workforce by roughly 10%. These reductions will include executives, managers, and employees," end quote, Augsburg's message said. Boeing shares fell 1.1% in an aftermarket trading. These sweeping challenges are a big move by Augsburg, who arrived in August at the helm of the I'm not even sure what that word is, but plane maker promises to reset relations with the union and its employees. Boeing recorded pre-tax earnings charging totaling $5 billion for its defense business and two commercial plane programs. On September 20, Boeing asked the head of its troubled space and defense unit, Ted Colbert. Boeing reported its third quarter earnings on October 23rd, said in a separate release that it now expects revenue of $17.8 billion, a loss per share of $9.97, and better than expected negative operating cash flow of $1.3 billion. Analysts on average were expecting Boeing to generate quarterly cash burn of negative $3.8 billion, according to LSEG data. Thomas Haynes, a quantity manager at Great Hill Capital, said the layoffs could put pressure on employees to end the strike. Quote, "Striking workers who temporarily do not have a paycheck do not want to become unemployed workers who permanently do not have a paycheck," Haynes said in an email. "I would estimate that the strike would be resolved within a week, as these workers do not want to find themselves in the next batch of 17,000 cuts. Reaching a deal to end the work stoppage for Boeing is critical," which filed an unfair labor practice charge with the National Labor Relations Board on Wednesday, accusing the machinists union of failing to bargain in good faith. Rating agency S&P estimated that the strike is costing Boeing $1 billion a month, and the company risks losing its prized investment-grade credit rating. Augsburg also said that Boeing has not notified customers that it now expects the first delivery of its 777X in 2026 due to challenges in development, the flight test pause, and the work stoppage. Boeing has already faced issues with certification of the 777X that had significantly delayed the plane's launch. Quote, "While our business is facing near-term challenges, we are making important strategic decisions for our future and have a clear view on work we must do to assure our company," Augsburg added. Boeing will end its 767-300 freighter program in 2027 when it completes the deliveries for their remaining 29 planes ordered, but said production for the KC-46A tankers will continue. The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAM, the union representing the striking workers, said in a statement Boeing's announcement regarding the 767 commercial freighter was troubling and that it would assess its implications. IAM also described Boeing's claims against the union with National Labor Relations Board as groundless. It said both claims in the discontinuation of the 767 cargo planes seem to intend to distract from the group's, quote, "failure to return the negotiation table with their frontline workers," end quote. John Holland, president of IAM District 751, said in a statement that Boeing's attempt to bargain in the press, quote, won't work and is detrimental to the bargaining process, end quote. He also said an unwillingness to negotiate would only prolong the strike. Boeing said in light of the job cuts that it would end a furlough program and for salaried employees announced in September. Even before the strike began on September 13th, the company had been burning cash as it surged to recover from a January mid-air panel blowout on a new plane that exposed weak safety protocols and sputtered U.S. regulations to crumb its production. Boeing on Friday faced a court hearing in Texas in front of a judge who will decide whether to accept the plane maker's offer to plead guilty to a fraud under a deal with the Justice Department. Boeing had agreed to pay up to a $478 million fine, spend at least $455 million on improving safety, and face 3 years of court-supervised probation and independent oversight. Also Friday, a national watchdog said the Federal Aviation Administration was not effective in overseeing Boeing's production. Reuters reported this week that Boeing is examining options to raise billions of dollars through a sale of stock in entity-like securities. These options, including common stock as well as securities such as mandatory conservative bond or convertible bonds, and preferred equity, along with the sources. One of the sources said they suggest Boeing that it should raise around $10 billion. The company had about $60 billion in debt and posted an operating flow losses of more than $7 billion for the first half of 2024. Analysts estimate that Boeing will need to raise between $10 billion and $15 billion to maintain its rating, which are now one notch above junk. Michael Ashley Salzman, the partner at the Running Point Capital Advisories, said that delaying the 777X delivery and labor downsizing was not a major surprise. Quote, their credit rating and share price has been at risk for the better part of a decade because of its mismanagement, and the stubbornness displayed in the strike may be the straw that breaks the camel's back, he said. All right, so that's the article here about Boeing, and yeah, we know that's been really concerning for a long time, but I mean, when is it going to end? And I know I just started doing these news videos, so we're not completely caught up to speed on all of what's happened with Boeing, especially down to the details, but just the general summary here real quick. Obviously, since they launched the 737 MAX 2016, the plane was very rushed to compete with Airbus's Airbus A320neo family aircraft, and obviously that didn't end up being a great decision. There were two very fatal accidents overseas, and that ended up getting the aircraft grounded in 2019 for an extended period of time. And there's been a variety of other issues with the aircraft, including, we have obviously established the MCAS issues, but obviously what they talked about with the panel in January on the 737 MAX 9 for Alaska, among other issues, really makes the product very concerning. But obviously there's been more issues than just that. So if you don't know, Boeing was a very successful company up until that point. Their shares were about $400 at their peak, which is very good for any company, especially with really good earnings per share, among other contributing factors that make Boeing a very favorable company in those aspects. Well, what ended up happening from there was that the 737 MAX issues presented themselves and the Boeing stock crashed from that, and then it fully crashed and burned pretty much from where it was, at least, all the way down after the pandemic, and then it's failed to get much better. I think they ended up getting back to like $250 at some point in 2023, but over the last several months, it's continued to just free fall down, and it's now at the lowest it's been in a long time. I think it's under $150 a share now, which is just crazy to think about. But let's talk about some of the reasons why this is a contributing factor. So first and foremost, we obviously talked about, it goes for Boeing rushing the 737 MAX. We have established that. That's a video by itself. If you'd like to see it, let me know, and I'd be happy to dive into it. But there's a bunch of great videos on YouTube on it already. So that's contributing factor number one. And, how they've handled that since then has definitely been interesting for sure. Obviously, Boeing outsources a bunch of their maintenance to companies like Spirit Aerosystems and others. And this comes with pros and cons. Obviously, it's more affordable for Boeing to do this. Major con being that there's probably not as good production when it's not in-house, and there's not as many people to oversight that. So there's been a bunch of rumors about Boeing overtaking Spirit Aerosystems, among other companies. So we'll see if that ends up happening, and we'll just have to keep our eye out on what the future looks like for those companies. But it's not just about that either. Obviously, due to the various strikes and whatnot, they've had so many planes that they've been trying to produce just sitting because there's nobody to work on them, or they just can't decide what they want to do. A great example is when I went to the Boeing plant at Everett in April. I looked at it myself, and planes were just static. They weren't moving, which obviously is not good. You want maintenance to be going on all the time. And this isn't to say that Boeing's going to go anywhere. Obviously, if you don't know, Boeing has over 150,000 employees, and they pretty much have their own community at these various places where they have their plants, places like Everett and Charleston, South Carolina. So obviously it's an essential function to the economy of the United States, but very much essential to the future of aviation as well, as these aircraft have to get into service. The amount of 737 MAX orders out there is absolutely incredible from companies like Southwest Airlines, Qatar, among others, that is substantial, and they got to fulfill them. And I think American also has a huge order, and this goes back to another major issue to talk about as well, and I'm sure this will be a video for another time too, the certification of the Boeing 737 MAX 7 and MAX 10 aircraft that have large orders from Southwest, United, American, among other companies. These concept aircraft are, well, they're not concepts obviously, but these aircraft, the concept of these aircraft is super vital for companies like Southwest that need a smaller capacity plane, and then companies like United and American that want to fly some of the longest flights of 737s ever flown before. So it's very vital for Boeing to make every effort they can to continue to find a way to get these aircraft certified, despite the issues. I believe there's weight balancing issues on the MAX 7 because of the engine being so much larger, so that's an issue. And then as for the MAX 10, there's quite a variety of complications going on with that, so that'll have to be saved for another time. So that's certainly very important. But obviously, with these planes sitting, and then we get into the talk about the 777X, which has just been an ongoing, I don't want to say disaster, but man, it took so long to get this aircraft going. I mean, I don't know when it was, but I think it was back in like 2015 or so when this aircraft was first announced. And, obviously they started work on it, I think, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'm not sure when it was, but way too long ago. It needs to be flying at this point. So obviously these strikes don't help. And it goes back to various fundamental concepts of the U.S. landscape right now, and, all of the various factors that go into that. But at the same time, this has got to get balanced. So, cutting 17,000 jobs is a huge fraction of what Boeing has, 10%. And obviously that will help the strike most likely. But again, anytime you lay off 17,000 jobs, it's not good. That puts so many people out of work, and it's just crazy to think that that's happened. When you look at a company like Airbus, which has completely thrived in a much more, geographically friendly location, Mobile, for operating costs, but obviously they have so much of their operation in-house. Not only that though, but they've been super successful getting aircraft out consistently, have not had any major disasters, which is super important to establish there. So with that being said, I mean, what's next for Boeing? We obviously talked about how much money they've lost, and they just continue to lose money. I think if we put all the money together, they've lost $12 billion this year. That's not good, especially for a country's monopoly for aircraft manufacturing, which is Boeing here in the United States, even though Airbus's plant here has been very successful. So what's the future going to look like with no consistency? And obviously it's not going very well for the investors and the stockholders, as the stock is on the lowest it's been since whenever it was. So it's just not good, and we can really hope that it gets better because, obviously there's companies that have orders for the 737 MAX, and obviously the 777 freighters that are still in production, other aircraft like that. And obviously for the 767 freighter ending production, obviously we're towards the end of that line, so it makes some sense. And, I don't know how many outstanding orders there are for those aircraft, but I'm sure that it adds up in some regards regardless. But anyway, it's just interesting to think about that and what's going on. And, the KC-46 is an essential aircraft for various militaries. So yeah, it's great to see that they're still continuing that production. But yeah, I mean, it's never a good sign when, the 767 freighter still had plenty of potential for ordering. It's not the 747, the 767 is a pretty efficient aircraft, not the most efficient, but a pretty efficient aircraft for its size to transport cargo. UPS and FedEx certainly agree with that. So yeah, it's just crazy to think about all this, and it's going to be interesting to watch what happens going forward. I think for Boeing, they got to stop outsourcing. They got to get it all in-house. It doesn't matter how you're already so far gone financially. You got to do whatever it takes at this point to return to any sort of, obviously profitability is the goal, but they're so far from that, you can't even really use that phrase right now. So yeah, there's so much to talk about with Boeing. We could dive into a real analysis, but I definitely want to continue to follow along with this situation, do more news videos moving forward. So I hope all of you enjoyed this. Apologies if I stuttered a couple words. I'm still getting better with reading, this, literature. So I will do my best moving forward so it's as enjoyable for all of you as possible. But anyway, I really hope all of you enjoyed this. So looking forward to what's to come here for Boeing. Hopefully it will get better, but I'll definitely be back to report on more news when it comes out. So with that being said, everybody, that'll do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I want to thank each and one of you for watching. My name is Redriveraviation. Take it easy, everybody. Stay safe. Trust the process. Do you love and love you do. My name is Redriveraviation. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon as Redriveraviation is signing off.